on the topic of potential Game of Thrones-esque things coming, there was an article recently where the HBO boss was basically saying how uh, he wants at least 0 to 10 spin-offs. At least 0 to 10. Like somewhere in between that, because we have Fire and Blood,
Yeah.
Dunk and Egg, and there's
Uh-huh.
actually another spin-off coming. Did you hear about this?
Uh-uh.
It's an animated one.
Oh, I see.
hmm And I wanted to ask you one question in regards to this, but this is what the HBO boss said. As you know, George R.R. Martin has created a very large and detailed universe. What's
Mm.
great about it is there are roadmaps and histories and characters that lend themselves to adapting for TV. And you know, we've got House of Dragon coming. We start shooting in April. I'd rather not come up with like an arbitrary number. I want 3 shows or 5 shows or 10 shows or whatever it is. I really
Yeah.
try to talk to the team about what are the stories we're telling, what are the characters worth highlighting, the number of shows that I want are coming, blah, blah, blah. So I try to let that be our guide as opposed to picking a number and working backwards. If the show is good, that's what we'll do. So what he's basically saying is he's not going to crowd the market with crap. He wants to pick good quality stories and put them out there, which is somewhat consistent with what HBO has always done. Because HBO versus Netflix likes to just put crap out no matter what it is, right?
Yeah.
That's the new meme nowadays. But HBO has always,
Yeah.
in a sense, put out quality content.
Right. Yeah. It's very rare that you watch something on HBO that's of bad quality. Like it's usually like their mediocre is still pretty good. Like, yeah. Unlike Netflix is just all about bulk. Like there's some really great stuff on Netflix, but that's because like if you throw enough shit at the wall, yeah, some stuff's gonna stick. Like there's some real, like some of the best things I've ever seen are on Netflix, but also like, man, they've got a lot of crap, but
Well, Netflix and HBO, they don't like each other. I think that rivalry is somewhat public, but at least Netflix has the one thing in common with HBO. It's where they both can't stick the landing in regards to House of Cards. Because House of
yeah.
Cards last season on Netflix was fucking trash. Holy shit. Was
Yeah,
absolute
well, I
garbage.
mean, Kevin Spacey wasn't in it, and they had to deal with that. So there's some stuff.
But the one thing I wanted
So
to ask you about, real quick, I didn't know this, and someone said this to me in my comment section on Discord. George doesn't want HBO to adapt Dunk and Egg.
I did not see that.
In 2014, when Thrones was in its 4th season, 8 total, Martin blogged that he still maintained the TV rights to Tales of Dunk and Egg, but left the door open on selling them to HBO at some point down the road. But in 2017, as Thrones was nearing its end, Martin blogged that he didn't want anyone to adapt Tales of Dunk and Egg for precisely the reason Thrones was receiving criticism at the time. And this is what Martin said, I believe. We're not doing Dunk and Egg. Eventually, sure, I'd love that. And so would many of you. But I've only written and published 3 novellas to date, and there are at least 7 or 8 or 10 more I want to write. We all know how slow I am and how fast a television show can move. I don't want to
Huh.
repeat what happened with Game of Thrones itself, where the show gets ahead of the books. When that day comes, I finish telling all my tales of Dunk and Egg, then we'll do a TV show about them, but that day is still a long ways off. So, HBO developing Tales of Dunk and Eggs, that means either he's changed his mind, or he's allowing HBO to use its characters for a series. Because you can adapt the Tales of Dunk and Egg as a whole show, or you can just take the characters and just give them their own adventures.
So I thought it was my understanding that HBO owns not just Ice and Fire, but owns the bulk of all of George R. R. Martin's works.
His cinematic universe, if you will.
Yeah, that they bought everything, and with the exception of stuff that he had already sold, which is why Night Flyers ended up owned by the Sci-Fi Channel, because that had to do with the fact that there was a previous Night Flyers movie, and so the rights, he had already sold off those rights, so you can't resell something you don't own anymore. So like, and so when Sci-Fi Channel pushed for the Night Flyers series, George R. R. Martin was actually like caught off guard. He's like, what? They own that? I didn't know that. Like, I thought HBO owned everything. So you'd think that they have the right to push Dunk and Egg. Like, I don't know like what the contract says if George R. R. Martin has veto power or whatever, but it sounds like, I mean, I would think that if HBO wanted to do Dunk and Egg, that's it. Like, they're doing Dunk and Egg. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's exactly in the contract or the terms, like if George R. R. Martin has veto power. But I mean, plus George changes his mind. So if at one time he's like, oh, I'm not sure I want them to do it because I'm gonna write more Dunk and Egg stories. He's not gonna write any more Dunk and Egg stories. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, that it's not happening. If he were gonna write more Dunk and Egg stories, they wouldn't have released Tales of a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms or whatever. Because in fact, I remember specifically someone asking if there was going to be Dunk and Egg stories put together in a book, and he said, oh, maybe when I finish a few more. And then, no, they released The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms anyway, because, he needed to push books out for his publisher, because he's not doing it with Winds of Winter. So, no, I mean, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because HBO wants it to happen. I don't necessarily think that, like, George saving it because he's going to write more is a valid reason, because he's not going to write more.
Well, if HBO was smart, they would realize that, because they used to do a bunch of miniseries, like, way back in the day, and now they don't do almost any anymore, which I understand, like, it's more profitable to do a full-on series, but I wouldn't mind Dunk and Egg being like a 5-episode or an 8-episode limited series or something like that, Like, in the same article with the HBO boss about Game of Thrones, the next question here is about Watchmen. And Damon Lindelof has been adamant he's not doing any more Watchmen, but after all those Emmys, is HBO meeting with another writer looking for ideas for another season of Watchmen? That was the question. The boss said, no change there. Never say never, but the adaptation was so from his brain, it's hard to imagine someone else doing it. But there are no active conversations or courting anybody or putting it out there in any way that we're doing, for example, with Game of Thrones. So... Yeah. It's as of right now, it sounds like Watchmen is just what it is now, a limited series, and that's it. And I wouldn't mind that for Tales of Dunk and Egg. I really wouldn't. So until George can put out more stories, because we've seen what happens when people try to take his characters and do their own thing with them. But at the same time, maybe in better hands will Tales of Dunk and Egg thrive. I mean, look at The Handmaid's Tale. I've been actively watching Handmaid's Tale. And there was only one book, and I believe season 1 covers that first book. And then you go on to season 2, and they take the characters from the first season, from the first book, and they do amazing things with it. Season 2, best season so far. Season 3, not better than season 2, but I would say better than season 1. And they've been doing great things with these characters with no material for them whatsoever beyond the first book.
There's definitely examples where you can move beyond the material and still have a good show. I mean, The Leftovers was a great show, moving beyond the material. Handmaid's Tale, even Big Little Lies moved beyond the material and was okay. The second season was okay, So yeah, you put something in the right hands, it's going to be great. And that's the thing, as I realize, is that like even if you have like a really small shit idea or, a property that's not even that great, you can turn it into something that's incredible with good writing, good acting, good production. I was thinking about, so Comic Book Girl 19 and her comment about Iron Man, which is very accurate actually, because, in case people don't know, like, Carmine and I both very much admire Comic Book Girl 19. She was the inspiration for our channels. Comic Book Girl 19 said when Iron Man was coming out, and maybe it was when Iron Man 2 came out or whatever, like, it's interesting because people are sitting here pretending that Iron Man was this beloved character that everyone was into. No, he wasn't. He was a B-list character. No one cared about Iron Man, okay? Nobody. People that claim they were an Iron Man fan, like, are just lying, okay? There were Spider-Man fans, and there were X-Men fans. No one is a freaking Iron Man fan, okay? But Marvel sold off, like, all of their good properties. They sold off the X-Men. They sold off Spider-Man. They sold off Fantastic Four. They were left with nothing. That's why they had to do Iron Man, because he was a freaking BK. I think she called him D-list, and she's like, maybe he's not D-list, maybe he's C-list. I was like,
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that Robert Downey Jr. did an amazing job and made him A tier.
oh God, oh yeah, absolutely. And now the Avengers, which was always a second-rate book, it was not X-Men. I mean, they got Robert Downey Jr. They got some great writing. They got some great production, and they made a miracle. And then they kept doing it with shitty properties. Like Ant-Man was never fucking popular, okay? They didn't even have Ant-Man books. Ant-Man was never a regular series. Ant-Man's a pretty good movie. WandaVision, honestly, the fucking Vision and the Scarlet Witch, now you're talking like the bottom of the fucking barrel. And I'm praising, like, WandaVision is one of the best fucking things I've ever seen. It's so fucking good.